Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a terrific day ahead of you. I certainly am having a terrific day, not only because I get to record for you lovely people, but also because I've changed the mic settings, which has allowed me to change its position, and it's picking up the audio better, and it's much more comfortable for me to record now. I don't think I realized what I was missing out on. So hopefully the quality of the videos will rise from that. Today, I have a very different video for yourself. What I've got is a look at defenders as a whole in some real depth. And not only are we going to be using eye tests and fixtures, but we're also going to be using the score analysis. In the first slide, of only 3 in this video, you will see a table of data. In the second slide, you will also see a table of data, accompanied by some notes, of course, mainly focusing first on defenders who are quite good in the CBIT category and why I think we need to interpret it in a slightly different fashion. Secondly, I'll be looking at why timing is so crucial, and I think it's being overlooked just because of the points that you're getting from CBIT. And then thirdly, I'll be looking at some of the more expensive and attacking defenders in the game and giving my opinions on them and why I think they're a little bit underrated for now, including an analysis into Milenkovic. So if that all sounds good, then maybe you could consider clicking the subscribe button, especially if you're someone who watches regularly but has not done so. And if you are one of those people, it would just take you 2 seconds and I would be greatly appreciative. If you enjoy the video as well, make sure to drop a like on it. But without anything else to be said, let's hop into it. Now, I'm not going to delete the introduction because I liked it, even though it had a grammatical error very early on, and the ending, the audio slightly quietened. So what I've done for this slide and from on is I've adjusted the output gain. So you should be able to watch this at a lower volume and still hear it well. In front of you, you have a table. A table which will show you a number of things. The player, their price, their position, which is all defenders in this case, and their team. But more importantly, in combination with that, in column 4, you've got their starts, the number of starts. In column 5, you can see the number of CBIT contributions, so clearances, blocks, interceptions, tackles, and recoveries per 90. And on the right, you can see the number of points they gained from these CBIT contributions. I guess you can call it defensive contributions here, right? And that's what the table is sorted by. Now, in terms of this table, there are omissions, right? For example, Nathan Collins would be very high up here when sorting for DEFCON points. However, I've taken the likes of him, Hillman, and some others out because I'm really focusing on the players that I think are the most worthwhile to target and the players that you guys have been targeting in general. I'd say the only one I've taken out who really could be here is Aaron Wan-Bissaka. But if I took him out, there was literally no way for me to get Aina in here. And I think his popularity has significantly decreased. And honestly, rightly so. Albeit I'm much more bullish on West Ham than it was a week ago when I hadn't seen Potts play, when I hadn't seen Juve, when I hadn't seen the fact that they signed Callum Wilson, when Paquetá hadn't been cleared, and so on and so on and so on. And Fulcrum was looking a bit better, right? But what you have in front of you is essentially those who are going to be really good on the DEFCON system this time around. The slide or the column I'd like you to focus on particular, as opposed to total DEFCON points, is the one to its left. The CBIT values per 90, right? And you can see James Tarkowski, 10.96. That means per 90, he's getting it every single game, according to that statistic, right? Because he's hitting that 10 mark. Naturally, of course, there's going to be games where he picks up 20, and then there'll be a game where he picks up 5. So he's not going to get it every game. But nonetheless, get what I mean. And in theory, if he did average 10.96, he would get it every single game. The reason I brought this up is I interpret the utility attached to DEFCON in a slightly different way to what I'd say is being pushed at the moment. And I think a lot more of it has to do is in coinciding, picking these type of players with timing and attacking certain fixture sets, as opposed to just picking them and set and forget. I'll speak about this more in the next slide, but now I just want to go into the fixture analysis more for each of these players. So let's start with James Tarkowski. Now, at 5.5 million, he represents the best of the CBIT category, right? So that's a great start. And I specify that he's worth 5.5 million because therefore he's not worth 6 million. And you're getting the best in the defensive category for 0.5 cheaper than you could, right? They could have priced him at 6, honestly, with what he was delivering last season, especially if they projected an Everton improvement. So from that basis, it's looking pretty good. For me, it's more so the fixtures just to open up. Now, I guess I would maybe be more bullish on them had Branthwaite been there preseason and had they shown me a really robust defense to start with. And they should, right? Like, they have all the makings and they have all the ingredients of being a really good defense this year. But until I see it, I'm not sure I want to invest 5.5 so early with these fixtures. Yes, 1 and 3 are okay in terms of the fact they're Leeds and Wolves. But to be honest, I actually think Wolves, led by Strand Larsen, could do some damage. And I really like Vitor Pereira as a manager. Maybe not really, but I like him as a manager, like quite a bit. And I think Elrond's going to be absolutely bouncing Monday night under the lights. And first game, I'm just, again, not sure they keep a clean sheet, especially if Branthwaite's not 100%, right? Because the drop-off between him being 100% and not is big. And then drop-off between, let's say, him not playing is even bigger. And then outside of that, yeah, okay, they've got 2 home games in the first 4, like everyone. But Brighton, rough. Villa, rough. I think from an attacking standpoint, both of those guys can get goals. And then you look past that, up to Game Week 9, and they face Palace away, they face City, they face Spurs. And apart from that fixture against West Ham, it's quite tough. And I'm just not sure for 5-5, I'm going to get too many clean sheets early on. And as I'll speak about later in the video, I still think that's the name of the game. Right? So not bad. Certainly not bad. I just don't think maybe as good as is currently proposed. And a lot of this factors into timing, which we're going to come on to later, as I've expressed. Now, Murillo, we'll speak about him in combination with Milenkovic and Williams, who is also there, and Aina, who finds himself at the bottom of the slide. I mean, there's not really much bad to say about Murillo. I mean, averaging CBIT per 90 of 10.6, great. Got it in a lot of starts, right? Because he got, from 36 starts, he gets, 38 points? That's 19 times. That's over a 50% efficiency rate where he's hitting this. That's magnificent. Like, that's really, really, really good. Especially when you factor in the quality of their defense and some attacking returns as well. For me, whilst I think he's one of the best defenders in the game, I personally think I prefer both Milenkovic and Williams, just because this is spread over an entire season, right? And if you look at the games where he's going to get most CBIT points, it's in the games where he's probably going to be most aggressive, right? As the one stepping up. And I think you'd see that in games which aren't really aligned with the earlier fixture set. For example, like the West Ham game, or the Sunderland game, or the Burnley game, all of which are found in the first 6. And it's in these games where I think you could see a reduction in his CBIT value relative to the average last year, right? Then you look at Milenkovic's attacking threat and 5 goals and 2 assists last season compared to Murillo's 2 goals. Well, that's already 24 points that he's going to start ahead. Obviously, the likelihood of them replicating exactly that is not too high, but he's the biggest threat from set pieces, in my opinion. That's not to say Murillo isn't, but I just don't think he's as big of a threat as Milenkovic. And that in itself is 12 CBIT games that Murillo would need to catch up, right? So, early doors where I think the CBIT he's going to be getting maybe not as high because of the fixtures. I think I prefer Milenkovic. And then I just prefer saving the 0.5 on Williams because his CBIT is still really good, right? For that price. I mean, 8.72, that's higher than Milenkovic's. He's still got threat from open play. So for me, I don't think it's as much of a slam dunk as it's presented. If you want to go for the guy who's likelier to get higher CBIT, then yeah, sure, Murillo's right there. But I think there's more attacking value in Milenkovic and not necessarily the disparity in CBIT between him for the opening set. And then with Williams, I mean, you've got open play attacking threat, but more importantly, he's 0.5 cheaper. That's what I've got there. Now, moving on, Max Lacroix. Great. Honestly, at 5, he might even be like the best player on this list in terms of the value presented, like overall, but he just has a very rough opening 3. I mean, Chelsea away, Forest at home, depends how they're firing. If they are firing, tough. And then Villa away, I don't think you expect any clean sheets from that. And then, yeah, sure, he has good fixtures, 4 and 5. Then the utility to gain after that isn't so much. I mean, they just open with a very challenging run. And yeah, again, he could get CBIT points, but how many times is he going to hit those high ceilings, right? Those 10, 11s, 15s, when he's not keeping clean sheets, on the assumption he's not. Again, not so sure. And the other thing is, he's getting what? 34 CBIT points, so 17 from 35. So he's only getting it 1 and 2 games anyway, right? So let's say from the first 6, 2 of which I'd say are decent fixtures, well, good fixtures, and 4 and 5. But outside of that, he's not got too much to compensate for in the terms of the fact that the clean sheet likelihood is far lesser in those other games where he's not getting CBIT. So I just don't think you'll see him rack up too many points, again, on the assumption that you don't think they keep clean sheets. I mean, Branthwaite is not so dissimilar to Tarkowski. one thing I would mention is I know that Everton have this set piece routine where Tarkowski peels at the back post, and that's actually been quite useful for them. And when he's there in those positions, I think he can score goals. I quite like Branthwaite in the air as well. So I wouldn't be surprised that if one of these guys scored, let's say in the opening 6. And Branthwaite is very much similar to Tarkowski. I think good. And I think when you're looking at it from a set and forget perspective, yeah, completely fair. Makes a lot of sense. But when you're looking at it in isolation for a set block where the fixtures aren't amazing, all of a sudden I think it's possible to go down the more traditional attacking fullback route who has better fixtures and then circle back when these guys have better fixtures. Zabarnyi's interesting, right? Because maybe without Huijsen, he takes an even more aggressive role as a centre-back. In general, Iraola's games are going to be very much hustle and bustle, right? You're going to have a lot of duels with the way that Bournemouth play. It's very useful for Seabit. So I think, in general, Bournemouth fixtures are really underrated. Well, Bournemouth assets are really underrated. And it's clouded so much by Game Week 1. Yeah, Game Week 1's horrible. I mean, I was watching the first half of Liverpool yesterday, and I was just looking at them. Yeah. I mean, if you get on the wrong side of Salah, Ekitike, Wirtz, and Gakpo, you're in for a rough day. So yeah, that game, no. But if you can bench him and you have a bullish outlook thereafter, I like it. Andersen presents great value at 4-5 because what Fulham have is they just have a very solid core. One, their manager, tactically flexible and tactically very sound. Then you've got Andersen, you've got Bassi, you've got Sanderberg, who's probably one of the more underrated sixers in the league. There's a reason Sheffield United initially paid big money for him, and I think he settled in quite well. And I think this may be his best season to come. You've obviously got 2 fullbacks who are very competent in a lot of 1v1 situations, including Anthony Robinson, right, with his assists, who's also on the list. And at 5, if you think Fulham start well from a defensive standpoint, some tough fixtures opening up, right? But if you think they get through it, they present unbelievable value, right? So I just wanted to make you aware that Andersen and and Robinson were certainly options here. This is one of the ones that I really wanted to speak about, Van Dijk. Look at all the other teams here, and I mean this with the greatest respect. Everton, Forest, Palace, Bournemouth, Fulham, Wolves, Arsenal, yeah, we'll come on to Saliba. But if you look at the value for CBIT per 90, far lower, and Gvardiol, but the same case for him. Look how high Van Dijk ranks when he plays for a quote-unquote premium team, right? That's seriously impressive. Like, really impressive to average that high of a CBIT per 90 when you're playing for Liverpool. And honestly, with the way they set up this season, so far what I've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if they concede a few more defensive transitions, and he has to actually engage a little bit more. And I wouldn't be surprised again to see his CBIT go up as such. Another thing is that the set pieces with Bert look pretty dangerous, and I quite like the routines they've been using, maybe packing the box a little bit more. As such, you will get a goal from him at some point in the season, right? But you could maybe even get a couple early doors. So the ceiling there, and even the floor to an extent, I think could be really good. So I like Virgil a lot, and we'll come on to why I picked Kirkes in a bit. Robinson we've gone through, Williams we've gone through, Richards. I mean, obviously we've spoken about Palace. He's very similar to Lacroix, very good in the air as well, and he comes in at 0.5 cheaper. If you wanted the utility for 4 and 5, only really, maybe a couple of other games you could play him in the first 8, then by all means I think it's a decent option. And if you think that Palace should start so strong, whereby they can keep out either one of Forest, Villa or Chelsea, then yeah, then it makes a lot more sense. Munoz is interesting. His CBIT per 90 isn't too high, but when he hits it, and he plays it with an attacking return, which isn't actually the most unlikely thing. Wow, right? Like, huge upside. So I think if you wanted to go for a set and forget, I would actually like this a little bit more, where in combination with a slightly lower CBIT, at least I have such a high likelihood, relatively speaking, of attacking returns over a long term, right? As opposed to just betting that Everton keep a clean sheet in a rough game and over maybe putting too much weight on CBIT as well. That's my opinion there. I mean, Agbadu's there. That looks really good when Wolves' fixtures turn, or if you want to start with one. And aside from that, there's probably not too much to discuss apart from the last 2 premiums out there, Saliba and Gvardiol, because what you will see is they don't average a particularly high CBIT. Now, there's one thing here, right? And I'm going to speak about Gvardiol later. He played most of his games at fullback. And I just wonder, in that transition to centre-back, because I'm such a big Ait Nouri fan, he's so good in that final third, does his CBIT rise? And it's just something I wanted to point out so that you could potentially, exploit. And with Saliba, I'm just not too confident in him being the best defensive asset to open up. I mean, I don't really like their fixtures. I'm not overly bullish on Arsenal as a whole, right, to start. If he's not going to be putting up Seabit and Gabriel's the main box threat for 6 million, I think you could do a little bit better. Obviously, like, there's places, for example, I know he doesn't have great fixtures opening up, but with my strategy, picking him coincides with that quite nicely. Maybe that's the same case with Saliba. I just be a little bit careful because I'm not sure that your route to the high ceiling is really there in comparison to any of these other guys or even the attacking fullbacks. This slide is exactly what I wanted to speak about. Even more important in my eyes than the last one. The graphic on screen, firstly, from Tom Hadley, and a shout out to him. He's produced magnificent content on X. This is his graphic, and I would strongly recommend you go and follow him. I will link it in the description below, as I will the spreadsheet to get all of this data. The graphic shows the number of times as a percentage that the individual achieved a 4+ point game. So the times they got 4 points or more in a game, right? And there's certain things about this that I want to pick apart and make a point of. And the main thing is surrounding timing. One thing I've seen with drafts so far is, let's say the template, right? Tarkowski, Murillo, Van Dijk. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that as well if you're watching this video. We've already established that maybe, just maybe, opening fixtures-wise, Tarkowski's aren't great. And yes, I understand you're saving a transfer. But let's look at Gvardiol, for example, last season at the start. I mean, he cleans against Wolves. He cleans against Villa. He then goes on to score a 15-pointer at Spurs. He conceded against Brighton. And I think there was maybe another return for him in and around that period, that early period. That is magnificent. That is so good. But if you look at DEFCON, well, he wasn't even on the list that I just showed you. And if you look here, he's at 46% for 4+ points, right? He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's 10. He's 10th. He's below the likes of, for example, Mark Gahey. And what I wouldn't want is for you to look at the DEFCON data and interpret it in such a way where you feel like you have to start with those players. Yes, it may cost a transfer, but a transfer is only 4 points. You can bring them in. If I'm starting with, let's just say, the Gabriel last season, where you favor his fixtures and he's got attacking threat, right? And I hit a 15-pointer, well, all of a sudden, for a 4+ point game, where even if you're conceding through your bad fixture and you're getting DEFCON, you have to hit that 4 times just to replicate the 15-pointer that I've just got. And I bring this up because I wouldn't want you to start with a draft and say Tarkowski or even Murillo, let's just say you don't like Forest defensive fixtures, just because they present value in DEFCON and you want to hold them for the long term. Because I guess if you really want to achieve those higher ranks, it is theory, right, as opposed to practical application because we've never seen it, then it would make sense to try and time it a little bit more than just going set and forget in your defense, right? And that's the point that I really wanted to make. And I wanted to make that through a number of players, not just Gabriel. Milos Kerkez isn't on this list, right? And again, it's done by percentage. But he was the 5th highest scoring defender last year. I'll come on to him, and I think he's underrated. But again, if you were to look at DEFCON and you were to look at these type of stats, then all of a sudden, it would paint a very different picture for the outcome. Now, I know, of course, he got the 5th most points not adjusted for DEFCON. But even with that, like being so, even if I were to adjust it, he would still do quite well. And at times, he would have been a magnificent asset. There were times early in the season where Aina, who's not on this graphic, was absolutely brilliant for owners. Same for Gvardiol. He was practically essential for all of us. And he does not find himself too high on this list. And at a bare minimum, he didn't find himself high on the data. Yeah, he's 6th, but I guess in comparison to some of the other names and how popular they are, you've seen Gvardiol on practically no drafts. Nuri towards the tail end of the season was so popular. Again, not here. Think about the times where the Newcastle defenders, how well Cucurella did for people, especially in like the middle, end of the season. And I keep bringing this up because, again, I think it's about timing these players, even with the DEFCON impact. Yeah, it increases both the floor and the ceilings of the players in particular that are good with it. But I wouldn't just go and put the likes of Tarkowski or Lacroix in when you don't think they're going to get clean sheets. At the end of the day, you still want attacking returns. They deliver more points in DEFCON, and you still want clean sheets. They deliver double the amount of points as DEFCON. So that's the point that I really wanted to make quite passionately, right? I didn't want you to look at DEFCON data and then maybe misinterpret it in terms of going to achieve a big rank this season. To finish up, I thought I would talk about the forgotten side and the other side of the coin, all of whom have been very popular in the past. and that is the attacking defenders, in particular, I guess, the fullbacks. Gvardiol's in brackets here because obviously last season played a lot of the games at fullback, but with Ryan Aina-Nouri's addition, I think you'll see far less of that. You'll see Aina-Nouri at left back. If he is to use a 4-3-3 system where the fullback is high, even more so, given his lack of left centre-back replacements in terms of Gvardiol and what Aina-Nouri offers you in the final third, pretty much unmatched by any left back in the world, I would say, in terms of what you're actually getting from him. Not so much in quality, because if you look at Balde in the final third, yeah, amazing, but I'm talking about the profile in particular. But I bring him up here because he's still going to be a threat from set pieces, and you know, some games maybe he will play left back and right Aina-Nouri won't play. And in those games, City's defense is still going to be one of the better ones in the league. I think they've got some challenges, but nonetheless, they'll still be one of the better ones in the league. And where they are, the high ceiling associated to him, higher than I would say with the Crystal Palace boys, as an example, who are all good on DEFCON, opening up. I'm going to now go into a short analysis of Milas Kerkez and why I think he's slightly underrated, and I will give him more time later on. Obviously, you've seen him in my Game 1 team. He was probably one of the more unpopular picks, so why? Firstly, if you look at his DEFCON stats from last year, they don't look great. But this is a completely different team, and it's a new role. What you've seen in preseason is a lot of him functioning on the ball as the left centre-back in a 3, and not as, well, barely any overlaps, and even like pushing into the half space when they've got possession or pushing into the wide areas. Again, not so much, right? However, what I do think is his DEFCON data is being, one, misinterpreted, because all of a sudden when you play left centre-back in a 3 for Liverpool, especially this Liverpool side where I think Bert's going to play in the middle, and you will have behind him Sabozza and Gravenberch, I think you may see an increase in defensive transitions faced. And as such, I think the CBIT data for him, the opportunities to deliver, for example, tackles or recoveries or interceptions, is going to increase. And in general, from what I watched in the first half, in a game against Bilbao, which was quite open and basketball-like, you'll have something similar against Bournemouth. You'll have something similar against Arsenal to some extent, right? They'll obviously look to control the game so much more, but like I said, if Liverpool are to concede more defensive transitions, that side of the game, which is good for Kerkez in DEFCON, could be beneficial. And against all three of them, it will be Semenyo, Elanga, and Saka, right? He's coming up again. So he'll have a winger who wants to go at him a lot. And I think all of these situations provide opportunities for him to return DEFCON. And I think the data hasn't really encapsulated that because it's a very unique circumstance, right? New player, new club, new role, and fixtures to start with, which traditionally aren't great for taking clean sheets, but I guess you back Liverpool enough. And obviously, for him, in terms of DEFCON, I think it could be a bit better. That's one thing. The other thing is I noticed that he's not completely restricted, right? It's not like he is going to function as that left centre-back and never move up. There are a lot of late arrivals from Milos Kerkez when the ball does go higher and wider and generally just higher. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him, especially with the quality of cutbacks from either side, deliver an attacking return from one of those late arrivals in some sense, right? It's not like he'll never get up. At the frequency I would like, no. At the frequency of the right back, no. I can't pick them, well, I can, but I probably won't due to the expected minutes. But nonetheless, I think there's enough there for me to go and pick him. And I'll show you some graphic analysis, and I'll go into it in more depth later. Cucurella, he really just embodies what I said with Gabriel earlier. I mean, I think the opening fixtures for him, relatively speaking, clean sheet-wise, are quite good. And I think that he's got such high attacking threat. I don't think Hatta will come into the team straight away. That even when he's not that good on DEFCON, too much upside because there's a 15-pointer lurking in there. And if I hit, I'm golden. Whereas I don't think that 15-pointer is as likely for some of those DEFCON guys. Aina-Nouri, probably the most unpopular player in my draft. Probably the one who's closest to the chopping block, if any. But in that final third, if Pep's going to set up a system where he's going to be in those zones, more often than a left back really is, with that quality and the players around him, this guy's going to rack up attacking returns. I think he got 11 last season, right? I think. That is a joke. That is a joke. And if he's playing in this type of role, the sky is the limit for him, honestly, right? And I want to have a piece of that. And they're still one of the better defenses in the league. So I would expect them to, certainly keep some clean sheets at least, especially in the games that I'm playing him in, as opposed to the harder fixtures. So I think all of these guys here have that upside. And Porro is maybe the best of both worlds. I think Spurs will improve so much under Thomas Frank, including defensively. Hard not to when you're not playing like that level of rock and roll football like they did it under Ange. Set pieces, especially with Maddison's unfortunate injury. Pretty decent fixtures to open up. And he's good with DEFCON. So, like, good enough with DEFCON. So, and he's 5'5", unlike any of the other guys here. So, all of those guys, I think, very underrated and certainly worth more consideration. Because if the DEFCON guys don't go well, and they don't really have great fixtures for me outside of Nottingham Forest, I think you're missing it. It's already a differential, right? So I think there's huge upside here. And then the last thing is just to talk about the likes of Cash and Dorgu and Conte and Robinson. Conte's box threat, Robinson's assist threat that we saw last season, Cash's open play threat, same with Dorgu, especially in that wing-back role. All of these guys are on the cheaper side, and if timed, when they have good fixtures and they're upside, yeah, okay, they're not great on DEFCON. They could be such bargains who return you such big hauls, those 15-point hauls, those 12-point hauls, if they click, and if you can time them, right, as opposed to just going set and forget with your DEFCON defenders and your centre-backs, I think it could be so profitable for you, especially when less people are going to be willing to do so, right? So that is my presentation to you. Now, this is not to take away from the quality of DEFCON defenders. I wouldn't even have to make this video if they weren't good, right, in some sense. But the whole point of this video was just to show you another perspective. And like I said, I like, for example, the Forest boys a lot. It's just where you go to the Evertons and the Palace and those sorts of teams who don't have great opening fixtures. I think there may be an opportunity to be exploited. Or at a bare minimum, it's not as much of a slam dunk as maybe it's currently being presented through the drafts shown. And that is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. And it was a different type of one. Also really enjoyed this mic positioning. If you did, then I would really appreciate a like on the video and equally subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I shall see you tomorrow for the next one. In the meantime, have a terrific day. Goodbye and thank you very much.